From the Pyle Media Ventures studio in Noblesville, Indiana, this is the Jacob Pyle Show. With tonight's guest, the herb guy Steven Horne, and the host of our show, Jacob Pyle.
Thank you, Zach, and hello, everybody. Welcome to the Jacob Pyle Show. My name is Jacob Pyle, and I'm glad to have you with us. For the next 30 minutes, unscripted conversations, but with a difference. No shouting, no cussing. All topics that are being discussed on the Jacob Pyle Show have been approved by me before the show taping. Now, normally when we tape an episode of the show, usually I have notes, I have things prepared. But in case you're wondering why I'm wearing a hat and just a t-shirt today instead of my normal attire, I literally can I share this story real quick? So literally in a few moments notice, usually we have guests scheduled on, for months in advance. This was scheduled for April, and which is when we taped this. And I totally forgot that we were supposed to do this. So, but we're gonna. So therefore, I don't have any notes. I don't have anything in front of me to ask the guests. But I think it's still gonna be a good conversation regardless. It's gonna be a lot of fun. And yeah, so my guest for tonight is a author. And matter of fact, he is known as the Herb Guy. Please, joining us via Zoom right now to talk about his book for us is Steven Horne. Hey Steve, welcome to the show. I always ask, you go by Steve or Steven? Steven? Okay. So go ahead. I guess the first question I always ask guests is, go ahead and tell us a little something about yourself.
Yeah, I'm a professional herbalist, professional member of the American Herbalist Guild, and a past president of that organization. And I've been teaching people about herbs and natural healing techniques for about 40 years. But tonight we were going to talk about something that's kind of one of my side interests, which is the whole idea of freedom. And I think this is accentuated by my journey as a natural healer, because we are so much kind of inhibited in our liberty to do what we do by the different policies out there. And recently with the pandemic, the censorship against people like us was really heavy. And even now, doing a video online talking about people who are experiencing symptoms long after COVID, I have these notes and warnings popping up on my video and everything, like, here's where you go for the latest information. So that's part of what propelled me into an interest in liberty and the founding fathers, but also the moral concepts that are behind what makes us able to be free. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay. Now, you have written a book entitled, what's the name of the book again?
Let Freedom Ring, and it's subtitled The Moral Foundations of a Free Society.
All right, and by the way, it is authored and published by Steven Horne. It's on Amazon and other places if you want to check that out. But go ahead and tell us about the book.
Well, I went to Communist China in 1986, and I was there for 3.5 weeks. And one of the things that really impressed me and made a big impact on me was when I met the governor of Tibet. Actually had dinner with the governor of Tibet. And when I shook hands and talked to him, he just seemed like any other politician I'd ever met in my life. And this is the person who would, 6 months later, there would be a rebellion in Tibet, and there would be, millions of casualties, or I don't know if it's millions, but thousands of casualties, and also all the monasteries that got destroyed by the Chinese Communist Party. And I came to realize something that I think was very important, that it isn't the Constitution that protects our rights, it's our belief in those rights. And at that time, when I came back to the United States, I thought we were pretty secure, that most people agreed with the concepts of the Bill of Rights and so forth. But now I see all of this is under attack. And that was part of the reason why I wrote this book, is because I think that people do not understand the moral foundations on which our concept of government in the United States was based. And it goes back to the idea of the golden rule, or what we call common law, which is that all of us know that there are certain things when somebody does it to us, we consider ourselves being violated, trespassed against. None of us want to be murdered. None of us want to be assaulted. None of us want to be enslaved. None of us want to have our property damaged, destroyed, or taken by other people. And so we can say that that is a law that is common to all people. And by the idea of the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have others do unto you, or in the negative, don't do to someone else what you wouldn't want them to do to you, we all kind of know that these things are morally wrong, right? And so that leads us into a discussion of something that has, plagued me for a long time, which is, what is the moral use of force? In society, there's a point where government, or I think that people don't understand, is that government is violence. Anything that government does, it is doing by force. It is compelling people to obey under the threat of violence. And that violence can be fining you, taking away your money or your property, throwing you in jail, or, in the worst case scenario, even taking your life. So nothing about government is voluntary. Nothing about government. If we pass a law, we're not suggesting people do this. We're not encouraging people to do this. We're saying, do this or you will be punished. And so the question arises in my mind is, what is the moral reason why we would exercise that authority? When is it morally justified to exercise that authority? And when is it not morally justified to exercise that authority? And I think that you see this in the Declaration of Independence, with the words penned by Thomas Jefferson that we're all familiar with, I hope, anyway, which is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, and which today would say people, all people are created equal and are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then it goes on to say that the purpose of government is to secure these rights. In other words, all of us recognize this concept that I said earlier, that we don't want to have our life violated, we don't want to have our liberty violated, and we don't want the things that we've worked for in pursuing our own well-being and happiness to be taken from us or damaged or destroyed. And that the role of government, therefore, is to protect those things which are our God-given inalienable rights. Mike, you with me so far?
Oh yeah, we're here. We're with you. Yeah.
Yeah, you can chime in anytime you want, but that also led me to understand something about the nature of justice and mercy. In fact, I took this common law course, and in it, this person said that the original definition of crime in America, which I have not been able to find because when I looked it up in the law book you referred to, those pages were missing, but the definition of a crime was a deliberate and willful trespass against the life, liberty, or property of another, in which there is a demonstrable loss of life, liberty, or property. In other words, in order for a crime to be committed, you have to trespass against another person's unalienable rights. And that trespass has to be both deliberate and willful. So deliberate meaning that you did it intentionally and you did it willfully. You weren't coerced into doing it. So we recognize the difference between when someone accidentally damages someone's property and when they deliberately damage someone else's property. The former is a civil matter.
Okay, Steven, I have to pause. Sorry, I have to pause you right there because we have to take this break. When we come back, more with Steven Horne. Don't go away. Welcome back. My guest for tonight is Steven Horne. His book is entitled Let Freedom Ring and can be found on Amazon and other places. When I had to interrupt you here on our last break, you were talking about the book. Go ahead and continue where you left off.
Yeah, well, I was explaining the definition of a crime as a deliberate, willful trespass against the life, liberty, or property of another. And understanding that, if you really think about that, that makes a lot of sense. We have committed a crime when we willingly violate someone else's rights. So associated with the golden rule is this idea of the law of the harvest. As you sow, so shall you reap. And the idea of the golden rule says, don't do to someone else what you wouldn't want them to do to you. So since we kind of all understand that we don't like our life, liberty, or property trespassed against, then the principle of justice says that if I violate your rights, then society has, or the principle of justice says that my rights can be violated to an equal degree. And you see this reflected in the concept of the way Old Testament law handled things like theft. If a person stole something from another person, the punishment wasn't to throw you in jail. The punishment was to have you make restitution to the person that you trespassed against. And that was to be at least 2 times what you took had to be restored, up to 7 times, depending on, the nature of the trespass. Like, for example, for a wealthy man to steal from a poor man, there was a greater penalty than from one poor man stealing from another poor man. But the reason why you have to return double is this. If you returned just what you stole, you have not suffered any loss. You're just replacing what was never yours in the first place. But by restoring double, you have suffered a loss equal to the loss that you inflicted on the other person. And that is the concept of justice. It's what it means by the idea of an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. It's not revenge. It's the idea that whatever was taken has to be restored, and an equal loss has to be inflicted upon the perpetrator so that they understand what it feels like to suffer that loss. And we don't actually have justice the way it really should be. I mean, Thomas Jefferson figured that out, and he wanted to reform the laws of Virginia to make that happen. But we have a punishment system rather than a justice system. But a free society exists when everybody respects everybody else's rights. So we're all equally free because we are free to express our life. We're free to be creative. We're free to acquire property and make our life better. And nobody is going to trespass against those rights. But the moment we allow trespass, then we no longer have a society of equality where we all are experiencing the same rights under the law. And that is really where the word iniquity comes from. Iniquity is short for inequity. As long as all of our rights are respected and we're all respecting each other's rights, we're equal. We're equal before the law. But the minute we allow the law to treat one person different from another person, or to allow a person to trespass against somebody without a penalty attached to that, we now have a society of inequity or iniquity. And that is where society begins to break down, because everyone can understand the common law and the idea of the golden rule, but the other kind of law that we're talking about is called ruler's law, where whoever rules makes the law. And those rules don't have to be based on the common law. And this was what you see in all governments that become tyrannical. The government becomes the agent of trespassing against the life, liberty, and property of the citizens of that government. And that's when you have the morals of society break down, because when people are subjected to lawlessness, they become lawless themselves. And again, this is a law of the harvest thing. So I tell people in my book that you really need to seriously consider what you support in the way of what government does. Because in effect, if you are voting and approving of the government doing certain things to other people, you're basically saying, that's not only how I think those people should be treated, but ultimately you're saying that's how I should be treated. And people don't often think about it that way. They want to apply one set of rules for people they like and another set of rules for people they don't like. But that inequality and that inability to see morality as being a consistent thing basically causes groups of people to become in odds for each other, vying for power of who's going to get to make the rules to force the other people to do what they think those other people should. And we see that happening in our society today as things continue to deteriorate, as people become more and more polarized, more and more upset, more and more trying to control other people's behavior, and it leads to a great amount of conflict and a lack of peace in our society.
Sounds interesting. Yes, that was a good discussion on the book. So we still have about 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes left of the segment. Now, I gotta ask you this, and I'm sure the viewers are wanting to know as well. Why do they call you the herb guy?
Oh, well, because I'm an herbalist. I actually kind of call myself the herb guy, or they sometimes call me the professor, because I've been teaching about natural healing for 40 years. I had a lot of health problems growing up, and modern medicine did not help them. And when I got into natural medicine and started changing my diet and using herbal remedies and so forth, I was able to recover my health. And now I'm close to 70 years old. I don't take any medications. I'm pretty healthy overall, and I'm able to take care of pretty much most of my own health problems and been teaching other people to do the same for a long time.
So now with the 2.5 minutes we have left, how can people get a hold of you if they have any questions on the book, or if they have any questions about what you just talked about, or what have you?
We'll have a website, and it's just my name, Steven with a V, Horne with an E, Horne, StevenHorne.com. And I have a free herbal newsletter. There's also a contact page and a place to sign up for consults if people want to consult with me. And I encourage you to go there. I also have a YouTube channel, and of course I'm on Facebook as well. So pretty easy to look me up if you just use my name, Steven Horne.
Yeah. I want to talk about now. Do you do podcasts on your YouTube channel, or do you do anything like what we're doing now?
Actually, I'm just starting a podcast called Healthy Conversations, where I'll be interviewing other people in the natural health field to get their insights and stories and so forth. But I have a lot of videos that I've posted of classes and things I've taught over the years as well.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. So, and then where can the podcast be found?
It'll be on my YouTube channel to start with. I may post it elsewhere eventually, but I'm just starting it on my YouTube channel.
Okay, so Steven Horne YouTube channel if you want to watch his podcast, and then of course your book, which we talked about, The Freedom Ring, can be found on Amazon
and Barnes and Noble,
and other places. Awesome.
Yes.
All right. We are going to take a final break. When we come back, I will have a preview of next week's show, and we'll have some more fun. Hopefully, we'll be back after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. My guest for tonight is Steven Horne. His book is entitled Let Freedom Ring and can be found on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other places. Next week on our program is the last episode of the season. And so I thought that instead of doing the usual thing with having a guest on and stuff like that, we're going to have we're going to be showing clips from previous conversations of this past season of the Jacob Pyle Show, and we're also going to have a surprise guest joining us next week as well. So it's going to be an interesting half hour, and I hope that we can see you then for that. Now, when we broke away from this commercial, you said you had some more to talk about on the book. I'm going to go ahead and let you do that. Go ahead and talk more about the book.
Yeah. Well, understanding the nature of crime by the definition I gave earlier, I got to thinking about it, and I thought, if we define crime as a deliberate and willful trespass against the life, liberty, or property of another, then what does it mean to be good? Most people think, I'm good because I don't do that, all right? Because I don't do bad things. But really, goodness is a voluntary and willing sacrifice of your own life, your own liberty, and your own property to benefit someone else. I mean, the idea of we think of heroes as people who make those voluntary and willing sacrifices for other people, like the person who risks their own life to save someone else's life, or the person who donates their own property to help someone else. And if you understand that goodness has to come from within our own being, then you understand that it is impossible to force anyone to be good. Because if you're trying to force people to be good, in other words, if you're trying to use government to force people to be good, all you're doing is trespassing against their individual life, liberty, or property through government, because it doesn't produce good unless someone willingly does it. And so you can't really do good through government. You can only inhibit people from doing harm. In other words, the purpose of government is to enforce the negative idea of the law of the harvest. Don't do to other people what they don't want you to do to you. But it can't enforce the positive side of the golden rule and the law of the harvest, which is to do unto others as you would like them to do to you. And so true mercy, true charity, true kindness is something that comes from within the individual. And I think we need to stop thinking of government as the solution to our problems. And I look at it, it's my responsibility to try to do good in the world and to encourage other people to do good in the world, not my responsibility to try to force other people to do good through government. And I really believe something very, very important. The founding fathers said that our constitutional government was only meant for a moral people. And if we as people in society at large lose our moral footings, that is, the more we stray away from the respect of other people's life, liberty, or property, and the desire to do good for each other voluntarily, the greater the power of government will be, because it's a law of the harvest thing. The more we trespass against the rights of others, the more we will reap having our own rights trespassed against. So I would encourage all of you to just really think about these concepts, read the book, and I have a number of examples of things where we could possibly improve in the way we treat each other, and the way we might view things through our legal system. But the important thing is that you morally consider this in your own life. As I realized that I wanted to be free, I realized that I had to allow other people to be free. Because if I don't allow other people to be free, I can't, by the law of the harvest, expect myself to be free. So the more freedom I want for myself, the more freedom that I want for other people. And I've come to the conclusion that I don't support violence unless it's something that I would be willing to take the gun and strap it on and go force someone to do it myself. And if I'm not willing to do that, and especially if I'm not willing to force my neighbors or people that I'm close to do something with threat of violence with a gun, then I don't think it's good for me to ask government to do the same thing. Because as a friend of mine, where he got a ticket for his wife for fishing without a license because he was ice fishing and he wanted to go grab something out of the car, and he told his wife to hold the pole, and a game warden came over and asked for her fishing license, and she didn't have one. He said she was fishing because she was holding the pole, and he gave the ticket. And he says, well, if I don't pay this ticket, what will happen? Well, a policeman is going to show up at your door. Whatever we're doing, as simple as breaking a fishing license, it's going to be enforced by law, by violence. And so we should very carefully consider what we morally support being pushed by violence if we don't want that same force to be used against us. Because the more we want to take away other people's rights, the more we're putting our own rights in danger.
Sounds like an interesting conversation. I'm trying to think. Now we still have. Now you said you had several examples that you wanted to share on the subject. We still have like a few minutes left. Go ahead and can you at least share us one example of what you were of?
Well, I think that our current legal system, even though it was set up with our founding fathers, fails in three particular areas. One is the idea that we don't have a justice-based legal system where we try to make people who trespass against other people make restitution. I think that would be an important improvement in our society. Another one has to do with the idea of property. I came to understand that property is when you take your labor and your creativity and you change something to make it yours. It's not just that you take a stick of fence and say, this is mine. So for example, the land and the water and the air weren't created by us. And Native Americans had this idea. We don't own the natural resources of the earth. The only way they become property is when we add our labor and effort to turn them into something. And I think that there is a prohibition in Old Testament law of people being able to grab up land and add, as Isaiah said, house to house and field to field until there's no place left for anybody else. The whole concept of people buying up the real estate so that other people can't live without renting and paying them money, or locking away the water or whatever from people is morally wrong. People need to have certain resources in order to live, and people have a right to a place to live on the earth. And we need to start looking at that a little better in terms of our equity. The other thing is, there's an Old Testament prohibition against usury, the charging of interest. And some people say, well, that was just personal loans, but I've thought a lot about that. You cannot have an equitable society without a honest money system. And as long as the money system can be manipulated by other people, and people can basically hoard up money and only let other people have it by loaning it to them by loaning people with interest, then pretty soon all the wealth accumulates in the hands of a few. So there are a few things about capitalism that I do think are morally wrong. And I talk about those in this book too, and some suggestions about, what we might want to think about going forward to correct these wrongs.
All right. Again, read Steven Horne's book, Let Freedom Ring. It is written and published by Steven Horne himself, and can be found on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other places. I thank you, Steve, for joining us, and I will be back next week, hopefully looking a lot better than this, with another guest to talk to. Until then, for Steven Horne, Zach Brown, and all of us on the Jacob Pyle Show, I'm Jacob Pyle. Thank you all for watching, and good night, everybody.
If you want to be a guest on The Jacob Pyle Show, or if you'd like a DVD copy of tonight's program, send Jacob an email. His email address is jtpyle1@aol.com. Or if you're ordering a DVD copy of tonight's program, send $10 check or money order to The Jacob Pyle Show, care of Pyle Media Ventures. Post Office Box 154, Noblesville, Indiana 46061. Please include the air date seen on your screen when ordering. Residents outside of Indiana add $5 shipping and handling. This is Zach Brown speaking for The Jacob Pyle Show, a Pyle Media Ventures presentation. This program has been pre-recorded.